So, hello everybody. It's working, right? Okay. Really excited to be here today. I had to miss last year because of a serious concussion, but it's great to see so many familiar faces again. My name is Josh, but most people know me as Kizrati online, where I'm the moderator of the Roguelike Developers subreddit. And I've made several roguelikes of my own, most notably Cogmind. So that's been my full-time job for the past 5 years. Special thanks to all of you who've made that possible. I know we have a bunch of you in the audience. So a couple years ago, at the first Roguelike Celebration, I did talk about how I became a developer. This time, I'm talking about how you can build your own roguelike too. It's pretty common for roguelike players to at least dabble in development. We're inspired by the games we play and want to make something better, something different, or just something of our own. So my talk today definitely isn't a tutorial. It's more about how to get started and general advice to help you along the way. So making a roguelike can be pretty tough. Not unlike journeying through a dungeon full of obstacles. Here's you at the bottom starting out your journey, and there's your target, a fun playable game. It's very easy for your path to end up like this. Oh, I need that feature over there. No, what about that one? I need all the systems. You might finish and barely make it to your goal, but at what cost? Maybe years of wasted effort and all of your hair. You'll quite possibly develop yourself into a difficult corner, then get stuck, demoralized, and quit. What you need to do is make a beeline for your target. With a basic plan and understanding of where to go, you can start with strong fundamentals, and then when you have that fun game, expand on it all you want. I'll mostly be covering those fundamentals, how to travel through this dungeon with a greater chance of success, especially when you're just starting out and full of enthusiasm, but also aren't sure how to proceed. So note that although this is an intro on how to start making a roguelike, it does not include how to stop making that roguelike. I'm the wrong person to ask about that. You're on your own there. So let's get the first and most common question out of the way. What language to use? The answer is really easy. Sorry, but A and Y is not some amazing new programming language. That says any, because the shorter answer is it doesn't really matter a whole lot. If you've already got experience with some language, then that's great. Go ahead and use it. Language is a means to an end when it comes to roguelike development, and people have used just about every language to create a roguelike before. Now, that's not to say there aren't some easier options. If you're just starting out, so I'll help you with a suggestion here, and that's Python. Python is often recommended for first-time devs because it's pretty simple and straightforward to work with. Just look at that code there. Wait, there's something, it looks different, okay. Just look at that code there, that's clear. Not a whole lot of weird syntax, and if you don't even know programming or Python, you can probably still figure out most of what's going on there. But don't worry about simple being a limiting factor. You can still do great things with Python. You might have heard of Ultima Regum. It's written in Python, and it's a beautiful and massive open world project. It's not complete, but nonetheless already an incredibly impressive project. Temple of Torment is another expansive and complete fantasy roguelike written in Python. There are literally hundreds of Python roguelikes out there. All in all, you'll have a smoother ride if you start with Python. And we'll come back to how to get started with it later on. More complex languages like C and C++ are good in that they've been popular for ages in game development, meaning you'll find lots of relevant resources and references out there. C++ is what I use, but that's only because I was familiar with it to begin with. I wouldn't recommend it for beginners, especially if your goal is to make a roguelike rather than spend all your time debugging. You'll find a lot of other devs using Python anyway, and so you'll have access to a good number of resources. All right, we've all got a dream roguelike, but should that be where you start? No. At first, you'll be learning a lot and making mistakes you don't even realize yet, so it's best to build up some experience first. More importantly, the focus of game development really changes from beginning to end, so it's best to go through the entire process at least once or twice before starting larger, serious projects. Keeping your scope small at first is the best way to ensure you'll actually have a complete something to show for your efforts at the end. So taking our dev map from earlier, that main path is what you need to focus on. It can be both a complete game and a stable foundation on which you can build more. All those other areas out there to explore are very tempting, but try not to get drawn too far away from the main path early on. It's like playing a roguelike. If you start by blindly running around in the unknown, doing only what you feel like doing, rather than what you probably should be doing, unless the RNG is totally on your side, you're probably going to die out there somewhere, repeatedly. Sure, this can be a fun way to play roguelikes, but building a roguelike is a different story and a bigger investment of time, so try to stay focused. The cool thing is you can build roguelikes piecemeal. They're basically a conglomeration of systems that can be tacked on if you think they'll support the game. After that, you can just repeatedly expand and iterate, hopefully with player feedback. In the end, you've got so much stuff tacked on that you have no idea where the last 10 years went. Looking at a roguelike project as a whole, it can seem really daunting, but all you really need is a plan and perseverance. Starting small is important because you're going to make those mistakes, and you're much more likely to fail if you aim big right away. So what does a small roguelike really need? A core mechanic. This is where the experience starts. It should be explainable in a single sentence, and this is what you want to prototype first. Go straight for the fun. What's this game's unique take on rogueliking? If your game only has this mechanic, is it fun? If you're thinking a little bigger, could this mechanic serve as a core for the rest of the game to sit on? Think about what the player is doing from minute to minute, which presumably has something to do with this core mechanic. So if that repeated process isn't fun, it's not going to matter what you build on top of it. So this initial proto-game, for that, you only want to implement as many of the outer elements as necessary just to bring out and test the core mechanic. Again, this visualization and its branches may look daunting, but it's just a sample of what's possible. Roguelikes can be really simple and yet really fun. Oh, wait. I was going to... One second here. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, OK. So next, to explore the core mechanics a little bit more, I wanted to take a look at 7DRLs. So a 7DRL is a roguelike made in 7 days. Every March or so, there's an event where lots of devs make their own 7DRL. It's already going on 14 years now. It's great because as long as you finish, you'll definitely get at least a few people to play it and leave feedback. Judges also score them in different areas, though most everyone treats the 7DRL like a personal challenge. It's not supposed to be a competition. It's more for yourself. So over 100 new roguelikes come out of this event each year. It's a whole lot of fun. And as you can see, it gets more and more popular. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing a 7DRL as your first game. You don't need that kind of pressure so early, but it's a good idea once you at least have some experience and know what goes into a roguelike, especially the technical aspects, because having a deadline really does help once you have that fun, once you have those basic abilities. So 7DRLs are great examples of start small and expand as necessary after you've confirmed that your core mechanic works and is a good idea. So 7DRLs naturally make good prototypes, and many are experimental in nature. We see a lot of cool ideas every year. So let's take a look at a few examples. There's Knight, which is all about controlling your momentum. You're mounted on a horse most of the time, and that little blue block you see in the middle there, so to the northeast of the character, that's all you can move, and you can only move at 1 space per turn, and that's where you will end up next turn. So you can only accelerate, turn, and slow down so quickly, meaning that you'll have to plan in order to line up your attacks on moving foes in order to behead them with your sword as you pass. So it's all based around that mechanic. This 7DRL is great. It's got its core mechanic right in the name. You're a ship in space, and although you automatically attack enemies within range, enemy-fired projectiles move more slowly. And you can see their projected paths for the next turn and need to maneuver so that you can both continue attacking and avoid being hit. Travis made that. He's back there. It's a great game. I love the core idea. And yeah, it was nice to meet the dev. So in 7-Day Band, you create your own roguelike as you play it. Wandering around, you're faced with unknown enemies and objects and have to set their names and abilities as you encounter them for the first time. Or when they start to matter. It's not like a bunch of menus right away. It'll occasionally pop a menu, what do you want this value to be? What do you want that one? So band here refers to making an angband-like of your own. In Broken Bottle, you play an alcoholic in a post-apocalyptic world where alcohol consumption ties into most of the experience, for better or worse, depending on your choices. It's a pretty story-focused 7DRL. Drakefire Chasm has you playing a young dragon fighting through caverns full of monsters, adventurers, and other dragons. But there are no items at all. You just upgrade your dragon abilities and eat your foes in order to grow larger and advance to the next floor. This one still gets occasional updates. In Golden Crone Hotel, you take advantage of the differing abilities of your vampire and human forms, including their interaction with dynamic light. This one eventually turned into a bigger commercial roguelike and has done pretty well on Steam since releasing a year ago. Here's my original Cogmind 7 DRL. Looks a lot different from the new one, but here you're a robot building yourself from scratch using parts found or taken from other robots, and there's rampant item destruction, so you're forced to rebuild pretty often. Obviously, this also became a much bigger commercial project later on. I never expected my little 7 DRL detour 6 years ago would turn into my job. But I'm really happy that I participated because that was perfect for proving the core mechanic was fun. This year, for the 7 DRL, I did Polybot 7, which is kind of like Cogmind, but plays extremely differently because there was a significant change to the core mechanic. Instead of the player choosing what items to attach, nearby items just automatically fly over and attach themselves to you from all over. You can't even remove them. The only way to remove parts is if they're destroyed. So I originally planned for this game to be kind of a scaled-down Cogmind, but as the 7 DRL got closer, I kept feeling that wasn't really a game worth making. It needed to be something with a truly unique hook to it. A completely new core mechanic. So it turned out pretty fun. Just changed the core mechanic and the entire game feeling changed. So while all these games I just mentioned may have more than one system, it's pretty clear where their core mechanic lies, and like many other 7 DRLs, they really stand out for it. So while we're at it, let's take a look at a few non-7 DRL examples as well. These games took years to make and certainly include a ton of systems and content, but you can still see how they revolve around their core mechanics. There's Mage Guild, which has the greatest alchemy system that lets you mix any 2 items. Anything at all, be it potions, monster remains, anything. And you get all kinds of new items and effects when you mix them. Logical results. It's pretty fun. There's Demon, where you recruit a wide variety of autonomous follower demons and train them. The Ground Gives Way, with its completely item-based progression. And there's Xenomarine, which is built around ranged combat and directional facing, not something you see in many roguelikes. One of the NetHack devs once told me, NetHack's core mechanic is, if it seems like it should be possible to do something, then you probably can. This almost seems like an anti-core mechanic, but yeah. So one of the most important things you'll need access to is information. That includes learning the basics, getting answers to questions, getting into more advanced topics later, or just food for thought. Your specific pitfalls will be different from other devs because everyone's got a somewhat different skill set and personality. But you can use online resources and friends to get around those pitfalls. While you probably don't have anyone working with you on your project, others can step in with advice when you need it. But you have to ask. It took me way too long to learn that. My early progress was pretty slow because I never reached out to people. So I'm here to tell you there's tons of help just waiting out there. So let's look at some of the most useful resources. Here's the Roguelike Dev subreddit, the largest group of active roguelike developers in the universe. In addition to our welcoming and helpful community, we also have a well-organized sidebar that will point you to a wide variety of useful resources. This includes tutorials in various languages and libraries. And we have members who have used them before and can help answer your questions. This information has been brought to you by the completely unbiased moderator. Okay, so earlier I mentioned starting out with Python. And the easiest way to do that is with the library known as libtcod, for which we have a tutorial. More than one even. Like most game libraries, libtcod handles basic features like your window, your mouse and keyboard support, bitmap fonts, palette and color manipulation, all those things. But it also does a lot of the roguelike-specific heavy lifting, like map generation, FOV, pathfinding. It does a lot of the work for you, and you can replace these parts if you need to, but it's a great place to start. Ultima, Regum, and Temple of Torment, 2 roguelikes I mentioned earlier, both of them multi-year huge projects, both started with the game they created in this tutorial, and eventually just grew into their own things. So libtcod is pretty great, and it's been getting updates for 10 years now. Another way to get started is to join our summer code-along event. Again, this is the Roguelike Dev subreddit. This follows the libtcod tutorial alongside other developers if you need the extra motivation and pacing handled for you. We've done the tutorial for a couple years so far, and interest has always been really high. We've got like 100 people each year who participate in this, and you don't even have to use libtcod or Python to participate. Many people use other languages and follow along with their own roguelike or similar tutorials. In any case, at the end of 2 months, you'll have your own playable roguelike. Here are some of the games that came out of our event the past couple years. It's a really nice walkthrough you can just tack onto or add features as you see fit and just keep going with it. These are the things that people ended with, though, at the end of 2 months. Now, it basically gives you the required technical background for a functioning roguelike. Then you do the part where you let your imagination run wild. So later on in your roguelike dev travels, we have facts. again, on our subreddit, that cover different aspects of development in order to get you thinking about how to approach various topics. We've done a handful so far. He's been doing it for about, over 3 years now. These topics, these include like meta topics. You've got planning and motivation, and also details like common systems, design, just all sorts of stuff. You can see this list there. It's everything we've got. Over the years, we've had quite a few devs contributing to these community facts, including devs of well-known roguelikes. Honestly, we've got tons of developers hanging out in the subreddit in general, many with long-term hobby projects, and who are knowledgeable and happy to help. We also have a Discord for real-time help and discussion. You can find the link to that in our sidebar. We share that server with the Roguelikes subreddit, so you'll also find lots of other people playing and discussing all sorts of roguelikes in other channels. Outside our subreddit, Santiago has got this great site you may have heard of called Rogue Basin. You'll find a whole section of articles. That there is just a list of the general table of contents. A lot of the content is a little older, but I mean, it's roguelike dev. Most of the articles are just as relevant today. This is where I got started years ago. Thank you, Santiago. And I found the articles both inspiring and enlightening. Well, maybe a little scary at first, but remember, piecemeal. That's how you want to build a roguelike, piecemeal. So it's a lot of stuff, but take it a step at a time. Darren Gray, Andrew Duell, Mark Johnson, and others host a podcast called Roguelike Radio. Check out all these topics that they've done. These include interviews with a wide range of roguelike devs. I'm even in 2 or 3 of them, including one where I say Cogmind might be done in 2016 or something like that. The new year is 2019. You'll also see that a number of them cover the 7-day roguelike challenges, which are a pretty big thing in the community. So that's knowledge covered. But another really big consideration when it comes to game development in general is assets. Here are our assets. Seriously though, ASCII is wonderful in so many ways, and it makes it so easy to add new content. And with the right combination of foreground and background colors, you can create some really pretty games. You probably recognize Brogue, but I'll just flip through some more images here to sample the breadth of the possibilities, all of which look great. There's just so much room for unique styles. The variety is just amazing, yeah? You can also use my editor, RexPaint, for interface design, mapping, art, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It integrates with libtcod, so bonus. For me, it's become a totally indispensable tool, and quite a few other roguelike devs rely on it now, too. Of course, if you want more people to actually play your game, or if it'll help you get into your project, there are also some nice tile sets you can use, even if they're just a placeholder. Many of these are free, and many more as well, or at least available at a reasonable price. You can find links to a bunch of tile sets in our subreddit sidebar. For some people, tile sets have the advantage of sparking your imagination, if you need that to help with development. Like you see this cool character, and you just, I know what that'll be. That's perfect for my game. Or it gives you a new idea. So you may have seen some of these tiles in other roguelikes before. All right, so for this last segment, I wanted to take a look at where to start your real design process, what you want to focus on. I mean, you might be satisfied with just moving a little @ across the screen, smashing into letters. Or you might want to go a bit further than that and hope that others enjoy it as much as you do. Of course, you'll want some kind of hook to get people interested in the first place, but this hook can take a number of forms. We already talked about having a core mechanic, which is one of the easier hooks, since it ties most directly into the gameplay itself, and roguelikes, first and foremost, are all about gameplay. All those permadeaths aren't going to be worth it if there's no replayability. Amazing audio-visual features aren't traditionally as common, although we're seeing more roguelikes headed in that direction, which is great because it attracts more players to the genre. But the one I want to emphasize now is theme, which is an excellent hook, but not taken advantage of nearly enough. We have lots and lots of fantasy dungeon crawlers. So naturally, if you want to really distinguish your project, go for any unique theme that's not a fantasy dungeon crawler. Roguelikes are generally based on good, interesting gameplay, but having a unique theme not only makes the entire experience unique, it also gives you a source from which to readily draw brand new mechanics. It almost forces you to do this. In particular, historical and mythological themes offer a huge range of established material to explore and expand on. People also always seem to want more sci-fi roguelikes than we already have. So that's another idea. We've seen some really unique themes in recent years. Mage RL, for example, it's a neat concept steeped in Japanese mythology and historical fantasy. I want to play that. Skies of Bloody April is a World War I dogfighting roguelike. These are the kinds of things that really turn heads, especially, of course, once they reach a fully playable state. One that is a very complete game is Lone Spelunker, where you explore natural and sometimes dangerous wonders of subterranean caves. And as for some other ideas that come up pretty commonly in the roguelike community but haven't been satisfied yet, pirates come up pretty often. We did have one game pop up called Pirate Rogue, which is among the highest ever voted threads in the roguelikes subreddit. But it was just a concept. And they were prototyping, and the dev put it on hold since they realized their dream game was a bit beyond their experience level. But the demand is clearly there, though. It's come up many times. Superheroes is another one that comes up all the time. Someone do it. All right, so there have been a lot of great stories coming out of the roguelike dev subreddit. So many awesome projects in there, both new and long-term. But I wanted to share one in particular, which I consider a pretty inspiring story, and that's Armored Commander. So in Armored Commander, you're in control of a single World War II tank, within which you lead multiple crew members in overland campaigns. Gregory Scott, the developer, started this project with only limited programming experience and just went at it with the libtcode Python tutorial. 1 year later, it was finished and featured in Rock, Paper, Shotgun. So that's from no game dev experience to a complete game featured in a top PC gaming opinion site in 1 year. Sure, there's luck involved in this sort of thing, but having a unique theme and sharing it around guarantees that more people are going to take notice. So pick a unique theme and own it. This gets more people interested, and in turn, that will help keep you motivated. Gregory's now working on a sequel. This is ArmCom 2. Remember that your game doesn't have to be a strict roguelike. I'm going to be a little blasphemous here and say it's not worth getting caught up in definitions. We often see people come up with a game idea they'd like to make, but then worry about whether or not everyone agrees it's a roguelike. It doesn't really matter, because there are as many definitions as there are players. As long as it's internally consistent and follows your own plan, you're all set. But don't worry, the roguelike subreddit will continue to bring you weekly arguments about whether or not something is a roguelike. All right, now to do a total 180. There's another approach you can try, which has its own advantages. It's the so-called XRL. These are based on existing IPs and save you much of the planning and design effort that goes into making a game, as most of those questions will already be answered for you. At most, you have to come up with how to adapt it to roguelike formulas. So with an XRL, you can focus on the implementation and other fundamentals while you get your feet wet as a new developer. Lots of devs do this. A while back, I made this list of examples on Rogue Basin. All these games here based on existing IPs. Personally, I think this is a good way to start out your early development efforts. Perhaps the most famous is DoomRL. It's officially now just called DRL, after they were hit by a C&D from ZeniMax. Luckily, it wasn't any worse than that, but that's a reminder you do have to be careful of particularly litigious companies, like Nintendo, for example. I'd advise against doing an explicitly Pokemon roguelike. Cornell Chilovich couldn't be here today because he's too busy working on the DoomRL successor, Jupiter Hell. But in his early years, he also made Aliens RL, one of the first roguelikes I ever played, and Diablo RL. Santiago, again, is here with us today, and he's made roguelikes based on Castlevania, Metroid, Zelda, Star Wars, Mega Man, and probably like 10 others he hasn't told us about. Even my own first semi-roguelike project, XCOM RL, belongs in this category. It started from an IP that, with mechanics I was already really familiar with and I love. That helped a lot. From there, I was able to branch out and add a lot of my own mechanics and content, doing experiments on top of an already solid foundation. So another major advantage that I wanted to bring up too about XRLs is that you have instant fans. All the other people who enjoy both roguelikes and that same IP. This is great for motivation since you'll always have people cheering you on. This helped me a lot in the early years. So some tips for the long run. Release early and often is the roguelike dev mantra. It's good to quickly get everything into a minimally playable state, again, a prototype, and it'll probably net you some good feedback, which is valuable for the long term. Sharing Saturday. Even before your first release, even with just a concept, and long after that, try participating in our weekly sharing threads in the Roguelike Dev subreddit. For some, this is a way to stay accountable to yourself, and it's a nice way to review what you have or have not been up to. You can literally post about how your week was hell at work and you barely got anything done. And in the process, you can make friends with others who are in the same boat. Or you can talk about the cool new feature that you added or are thinking about. You can share funny bugs, anything really. It's a great community. Keep a blog. Besides sharing Saturday, it's also nice to concentrate all the info about your development in one place, a public place. Blogging actually has a bunch of advantages. At the bottom there is just a quick list of some of the major ones. The other stuff there is, those are articles I've written over the years, just on my blog. I have like 100 or so that appear elsewhere. So check out the GridSage blog and you'll probably find a fair bit of useful info there. Accessibility is important. Now, traditionally, this wasn't the case with roguelikes, but nowadays, you have an opportunity to reach so many more players if you're willing to put in that effort. Now, this means sufficient documentation, a tutorial, full mouse support, a tile set, etc. So to demonstrate how valuable mouse support and a tile set can be, check out these player stats from Cogmind. That's a whole lot of mice and tiles. Note that some accessibility features are important to consider in your design from the very beginning, but don't worry about all this stuff in your first roguelike. Starting with an ASCII keyboard-only roguelike is just fine. So this is the end of my talk and the beginning of your great new roguelike. Get to it. But first, let's listen to all the other great talks this weekend. You can start on Monday.